Welcome to Convergence Healing with Peter Bedard, where we empower you to heal your pain on every level of your being, body, mind, spirit. Our show is about sharing solutions for creating the life you want. We invite you to stand up and choose a life of health, happiness, and joy. And we're here to show you how. This is Convergence Healing.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm happy you're here with us. This is Peter Bedard from the Convergence Healing Convergence Healing with Peter Bedard. I can't even say my own show name. The Convergence Healing with Peter Bedard podcast. I'm glad to have you here. You know, our show is focused on bringing you solutions for healing. And that could be physical, that could be emotional, that could be spiritual. It's about really helping you heal pain and any of those different kinds of pains on any of those levels. You know, recently we've had a couple people on the show talking about healing financial pain and poverty thinking. We've had people on the show talking about healing neck and spinal pain. We've had people on the show talking about healing familial pain and relationships. And today we have someone who is a pretty incredible guest. Dragana, no, I said it wrong. Dragana. There we go. On point. I got it. All right. I have to get that accent to the beginning. I was only reading your name before, so to actually hear it pronounced is beautiful. And it's got dragon in it, and that's just, yeah, ooh, it's got fire. So in a moment, we're going to be talking about how this awesome health coach, life coach, overcame endometriosis and practices and helps people in her life coaching practice with meditation, self-love, and setting boundaries. She has a book out that's called 7 Secrets to Happiness. Now, you all know that I always like to start my episodes by having a quote. Normally, my quote is a little long. It's like just a couple sentences, not terribly long. But today's quote, and I find quotes that feel right, that resonate with me with my particular guests. And today's quote is a very, very short, specific quote, and from somebody I would consider one of the heroes of modern psychology, of modern health, really, of modern magic, actually, and mysticism, and that's Carl Jung. And Carl Jung says, there is no birth of consciousness without pain. There is no birth, take that in, no birth of consciousness without pain. You know, I always talk about how pain is our greatest gift. Pain is that thing that's coming into our life. It's not to be avoided. It's something to be embraced. And when we sit with pain and we listen to the pain, we actually develop a two-way dialogue with the pain instead of a dialogue that's very one-sided and aggressive. When we build a dialogue that's of love towards that pain, and we actually even learn to love the pain teaches us, it calls us into our greatness. I've seen so many people, and you are one of them, who have responded to that pain and done great things with it. You know, they've responded to the pain, and instead of becoming the victim to the pain and to the perpetrator who maybe caused the pain, they are standing up and using the pain as a way to expand their awareness, their consciousness, their life. You know, it's the woman who is sexually trafficked as a child who now speaks out at the UN about those types of things and is a champion for children's rights. That pain actually transformed her life and turned her into a hero and not the victim anymore. And that's huge to me. So for those listening, I'm hoping that you're going to do that. I'm hoping that you're going to take your pain and you're going to not respond to it by being the victim to it anymore, but you're going to say, hey, these are the facts. This is where my pain is. This is where I am with that. And now how am I going to expand, grow, and learn from that pain? So with that, I would like to introduce you to my guests. And here we are. Hi.
Hi. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm really glad that you're here. Thank you so much for coming out and being on my little show.
Thank you so much for sending the invite.
All right. Well, we had a little online introduction, so that was really nice. When I called you up and I just asked you a couple questions, I knew that you were right there in alignment with what we're doing. So tell me a little bit about your story. You had a pretty terrible experience where your body was sort of going south on you.
Right. So, reading that quote is actually on point because for me, I think I was buried in a lot of emotional pain as well. But for me, it really hit in one place, and physical pain, and that's where the birth of my consciousness started coming about. So for me, the biggest thing was I was always a go-getter, so very disciplined, an ex-athlete, so professional tennis. So my mind was always at like, you got to keep on going no matter what, and that no matter what was somehow that I lived my whole life and just kept on going through things, not sitting with pain, finding ways I can work with it, especially emotional pain. So it was in 2014, once again, I was feeling serious abdominal pain in my abdominal area, and I thought my appendix had popped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was sweating. I couldn't function. And I was like, okay, it's my appendix. Let me go to the ER and get it removed. So once again, I go to the ER. And prior to that, I went to the ER
I'm interrupting you because that might be better to put those on. I'm sorry. I thought we were set up for you. She didn't have her cans on.
Oh, that's...
Can you hear a little bit better?
Wow. This is fascinating.
Is that good?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So sorry to interrupt you. Went to the ER.
No, so the ER, once prior to that, in 2004, I had a visit at the ER again, and it was endometriosis. So I told my doctor, I'm like, I'm super busy traveling for work, like traveling for this, that, just get this thing out of here and let's just move forward. Right. And he's like, I don't think it's your appendix, but okay. So it came out to be endometriosis.
Tell us what endometriosis is, because it's a word that we kind of hear, but I don't know if people really know what the actual physical experience of it is.
It's an ovarian cyst, and it's the number one thing for infertility, and especially as a woman.
It's very common.
It's very common, and it's very painful. For some women, it's more painful than others, but for me, it's quite painful where like the pain increases as the size of the cyst increases. And for about 4 months, I was in severe pain, but not where I couldn't breathe and move. So if I was more in tune with my body, I would have felt the pain 4 months prior to that. Right. I felt it, but I thought it was stress related, working a lot, like not setting boundaries, all of that, relationships.
So it was stress related.
it was stress related,
Right.
and that's what created it, definitely. But I was just thinking it's stress, but nothing is wrong with me, right? I always had that mindset where there's nothing wrong. So... Right. Ending up in the ER was the biggest wake-up call, because after that, the first month I was like, I'm going to work from home. I called my boss, my HR at the company I worked for. They were like, take some time off. I'm like, no, absolutely not. I'm going to get through this, work from home. I'll be okay. And then about a month into that, when I was taking Vicodin, and I'm not the type of person that takes any type of, Advil is the most I've taken. So about a Vicodin and a half a day, I was like, okay, something is off. Right. And I just, for whatever reason, I wasn't willing to do surgery again, because with endometriosis, it's surgery, and then it's 6 months of Lupron, which is what they use for prostate cancer. And, I did it 10 years prior, and I was like, no, I can't be doing this every 10 years or 2 to 3 years.
So this was your second time having these cysts?
My second time,
wow.
Correct. And, and being, like I said, a woman, the number one thing for infertility, I was like, okay, last time it was on my right ovary, now it's on my left ovary. And then there's a whole question around, can you ever have kids? And I think that was the biggest thing for me. I think pain hits you where it needs to hit you the most.
Right. To get you to pay attention.
Right. Because if it was anything else, if I broke my leg or, I would have been fine. I would have just kept on going. But this got me thinking, and being in my bed and taking a Vicodin and a half, it puts you in a different state. It makes you drowsy. So I couldn't even function, even though I wasn't feeling the pain, but my body was off. Sure. So that, that month got me thinking. I said, I have to change my life. I was just so disconnected. So that was the beginning of my journey. And one of the first things I took up is I started meditating, and I just started working with an individual where I started looking within and figuring out, what am I doing in my life? How am I living my life? What is my truth? because it's something I've always wanted to do, but it's something I never really put any energy or effort. And through that experience, I got off the Vicodin and I was able to manage my pain. And through that, I started exploring who I am and what makes me happy. And it all came down around working and helping people. I had about 15 sentences. It was all around people, inspiring, healing, helping. I'm like, okay, at least I got the people part down and the helping people.
Right.
So through a lot of work on myself, self-love so prior to all of this, boundaries. I wasn't setting boundaries. I was overgiving. A few hard things I realized. I was, attracting a lot of people who were manipulating and lying. And then I came to find that it's because that's where I was coming from, through giving, but sometimes giving with an intention of giving just to people.
To get something, right.
Right. And not, even if it's like love, right? And then it's not necessarily giving to get, but it's still a way of manipulation. And a lot of us don't look at it like that. They think, oh, I'm such a good person. But what is your intention?
Right. Well, if you're actually doing something in order to validate your worth, that's a negative experience. If you're actually doing something to get love from somebody else, that's not the best, most high integrity of an experience, right? Because that's a way, it's a subtle way, but you're giving to get. You're giving to get that appreciation, or you're giving to get that attention, or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And that's subtle, and that's what I think most of our world's been based on. Most of this sort of Western culture we live in, you always have to give to get something else. That's sort of a built-in, like, what are you going to do for me if I do this for you? And you can't just have an act of pure giving, because that people would look at you a lot like, well, who are you? Why? What do I owe you? There's that distrust and that type of stuff. And I'm glad to see other people that are challenging that way of being.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I was born in Macedonia, and I have to say that's where I was born, in the same city as Mother Teresa. I'm very proud of that. But the one thing is, the way I was raised is to give, just to genuinely give. And when I've been living in Los Angeles since the age of 8, but my mother really protected us, my brother and I, when we were growing up. So I started learning a lot of hard lessons in my 20s, because as a teen, I was constantly traveling, playing tennis. I didn't have as much time to socialize, to be in the real world, let's say. So I was, constantly surrounded by people that were achieving a goal, which is, to be one of the best athletes in the world, or whatever it is they were working around. So for me, it was in my early 20s that I was like, whoa, people are not on the same wavelength. Right. That I started learning these lessons, and I didn't know how to set these boundaries. And when you say in terms of like, you're giving, but you're giving. Yes, I was giving with an intention to get love, but also I was really giving from just to give.
Right. And so there was not that reciprocity.
There wasn't, but I think what was, like you said, what's interesting is that when people are like, defensive, like, what is it that you want from me? Right. More so that than the reciprocity, right? But more so like you start realizing that it's all about giving and getting. And even if you're genuine about it, like, there's a question, but when you start doing it, but then you learn.
Right. So you told us about how you had this endometriosis come up, and there were these tumors, and how you took some time and you had the Vicodin, and you learned that you couldn't stay on those drugs anymore. You had to make a change, and you did, and you started having this introspective work. You said meditation. It sounds like you had maybe a guide, a healer of some sort. What happened to the tumors?
So they're under, everything is, I'm good.
They're good. So the tumors themselves shrunk down and just disappeared.
Down. Definitely, but I besides the meditation, I worked with, in terms of my diet change. So a nutritionist in terms of eating gluten-free, dairy-free, no sugar. I was studying Kabbalah, I was studying Buddhism, so a lot of different things, spiritual psychology. So it wasn't really one thing. I think it was an overall change in everything. I started looking at the people I was surrounding myself with, looking at where I wasn't able to set my boundaries. Looking at how I approach myself and my self-worth and self-confidence. And with that realization, I came down to, the reason why I was doing a lot of these things is I had a fear that I wasn't even aware of, that I was unlovable.
Right.
So then I was overcompensating in every regard.
Yeah, that is such a powerful one. I call that like-me-itis. I see that a lot with my clients, right? This idea that I'm not okay in the world if I'm not liked. And I could be liked by everybody, but if this one person doesn't like me, then that means there's something wrong with me. And it literally is kind of like a disease state, like-me-itis. And it affects people so powerfully. So your story is very interesting to me because you did the work that I encourage people to do, that they have to go out there and they have to heal on these multiple levels, right? It can't just be one thing that they're working on. And I always give the simple example for weight loss, let's say. And I say, most people work on losing weight. If they want to do that, they diet and exercise. So they do this physical portion of it. But they're not dealing with how their brain perceives themselves. And so they may lose all that weight and look in the mirror and still perceive the fat kid, right? That body dysmorphic type of thing that happens, right? And their heart might be broken. So they may still be carrying around that wound. So if we look at just these three levels of our existence, right? The mind level, the body level, and the spirit level. And if we're only working on one level and the other two levels are at odds with that, right? There's the physical level that brings you to be skinny in the example of this overweight person. But the other two only understand how they exist in the world and how they understand it is as a fat person. Those two are going to trump the first. And they're going to bring that person back. And you would see it all the time on these television shows, right, with weight loss shows, where there's always that person that lost, in 10 months or whatever it was, they lost 400 pounds, and then they'd visit them a year later, and all of that weight would be right back on their body. And it's because they were not healing on multiple levels, right? And you intuitively started doing that. It sounds like you were guided to, but you just sort of decided, okay, I'm becoming aware. And it's interesting how that awareness, so this ability to understand, I need to set boundaries, contributed to a tumor shrinking.
Correct.
That's fascinating. Is there anything you want to share about that? Like any other information?
I think when it comes to especially the tumors around the second chakra, for me, it was around creativity and relationships. And I worked for a great company, a big Fortune 500 company. But one thing is I wasn't staying true to myself and doing what I wanted to do. I was working in finance. And I was doing that because that's what I thought a successful person should do.
Right.
So
not you as a successful person.
No.
What society or culture
Correct.
or your community said that's a successful person.
All of the above.
So it wasn't
right.
your definition.
Oh, definitely not.
Right.
And then the other portion was relationships, and in relationships, not setting my boundaries. So once I started working on all of that, I think there's, when I talk about power, it's this, first you have to get to a place of inner peace, right? So the first step for me was, I think, before I could even tap into setting boundaries or anything like that, getting in that place of quiet, that still place inside. And then from there, understanding what works for me, what doesn't, and setting the boundaries. And I think it's just all interconnected. And then as well, you said the mind. I did a lot of work, and I still do, around the limiting beliefs, the conditioning and
right.
rewiring the brain, because I think that's also, like you said, a very important component. It's, it's the compassion, it's the loving kindness that I never had for myself. But then it's like, what are the limiting beliefs that are blocking you from,
right.
getting past certain things? And I think I just knew that it's possible to heal intuitively, even though I don't even know how now, because I was all over the place. If I look at how I was in 2014, I'm not even sure where that connection came from, but thankfully it did, because it was
that belief that, I can heal this.
Right. And it's so funny, because sometimes I still don't trust something, and then I go back to that. It's like that trust of, I quit my job. I went on a medical leave for
That's
4 months.
huge,
And then
yeah.
I quit my job not knowing what I was going to do next, you know? I was like, it's all going to work out. And all of the fears around how am I going to do this, money, you know, that I had up until 2014. So, I mean, they started disappearing.
Right.
Right. And then a new belief system, new self-worth came around where now what I do, I can't relate to that person from 2014. But I think all of the endometriosis I just kind of let go of.
Right.
And I was dealing with whatever I had to deal with, but it was more so like just, okay, working on these levels that automatically something happens. I can't really explain it, but something I feel like happens in your body as well during this process.
Yeah, well, huge. Yeah, the body starts to get different messages. And we know there's tons of science around, how our thoughts create a physical component in the body, right? You have the thoughts of stress and they create all those stress chemicals, and those stress chemicals affect the body. And then there's thoughts of, we've done studies like why meditation's so powerful. When you have thoughts that you're thinking about of things like joy, they create a whole different chemical flow. And so that's huge when you adjust on that level alone. So one of the things that people can do for those who are tuning in right now is they can actually just challenge what their thoughts are. They can start thinking, okay, well, I have a particular thought, and that's my thought. That thought is potentially creating a pain experience in my body. Can I choose a different thought? And positive thinking is wonderful. It only goes so far. I think you have to do positive feeling. So why don't we talk about that when we come back?
Awesome.
All right. So
Looking
stay
forward
tuned.
to it.
We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're interested, check out convergencehealingteas.com. You can try all of these yummy, delicious teas that are actually crafted in my home kitchen to help you feel better. We have a Sleep Well blend, a No More Anxiety blend, and all of those ingredients in there are designed to help you feel better through the traditional qualities that Mother Nature has to offer. Check it out. And we are back. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your being here. Leave us your comments. We'd love to hear from you. I am sitting down with the beautiful Dragana. Did I say it right?
Wow.
I said it right
I'm
twice?
amazed.
Oh
I
my
love how
gosh.
you say
Yay. I actually like one of those rare Americans that can roll their R's. I love rolling my R's.
Awesome. I get excited when
Non-Latin
someone says
based,
it right. I'm like, hey,
Right? You just have to purr when you say your name. That's all.
that's it.
I like that. Your name has so many connotations. It's got the roll, it has the dragons in it, it's got that fire.
You can do a lot with it,
It's
right?
a fantastic name. I've never heard it before, actually. Does it have a meaning in your culture?
It does. It means precious.
Precious.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really great. That's a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Well, I am sitting down with this awesome woman who has healed herself, and in healing herself became a health coach and a life coach I keep calling you a health coach, but a life coach in helping other people change their lives. And, our stories are similar in that, because I had, decades of chronic pain, and I had all kinds of things that were wrong with me. And I learned to be well, but it was something I learned. And that's interesting in how the brain works, because I knew how to be sick. In fact, I tell the story in my book, which is right here, Convergence Healing. I tell the story in my book in how I didn't notice, because I'd been working for so long on getting better, that I didn't notice I felt better. I wasn't aware of it until around the third day. And I remember waking up and saying, gosh, I feel good today. And I felt good yesterday. And I felt good yesterday. And so I had this awareness after decades again of being in pain. And then the next thought that popped into my head was, oh, well, you better be sick. You better get sick again. And I canceled that. I said, no, thank you. We'll keep working on the feeling good part. But it was a great awareness for me, because I started to recognize how powerful my brain was and how powerful all of our brains are in maintaining an experience. If we believe that we're sick, we are going to be sick, right? And if we believe, like you said, that there's a potential for wellness, or that we are well, then you will be well. It's a pretty powerful experience, and you had that belief. It's interesting that you don't know where it came from. It just sort of was there for you. And that's a huge gift. I wonder why or what is it about you? You'd be interesting to study that allowed you to keep persevering even with all of the evidence of pain that you had. Right?
You're right.
What do you, any thoughts? Like, what do you think that was?
I've always wanted a different life. I think since I was like 5, 6, my mom always said I was very like determined, and I was the boss of the house. So,
Right? At 5 years old?
Yeah,
Right.
I knew, she said, you knew what you wanted, you went for it, and I think there was a point, maybe from like my 20s to, or like 30s, that I just kind of adjusted.
Right.
And I became a little bit of a doormat. And I think deep inside, I knew I wanted something else, and I knew that exists. So I think it was that belief that it exists, but not knowing how in the world it's going to happen, because I'm on the other spectrum of everything.
Right.
So I think it's that belief, and that perseverance. Like you said, I've always been able to get through stuff, because the one thing I believe is that we owe it to ourselves, right? And at times I have looked for other people to save me, and then nobody showed up. So
Right.
I decided to show up for myself for once.
Oh, that's so huge, to show up for yourself. And, if people would have shown up, you wouldn't have shown up.
Correct.
And that's just, I think, I call that life purpose lessons. That the universe is going to give you whatever you need to take that next step. And you needed to feel alone, maybe. One of my clients said something to me I thought was very, very powerful. She said that the tumor that she had 4-stage cancer. Wow. She said the tumor she had was the 2x4. So those are like big, for those in the European audience, those are building the lumber. Right, but we call them 2x4 in the English inches system, where they're big pieces of wood that we build things with. So, she said that the God, the universe, the tumor itself was a 2x4 that God used to hit her over the head and to get her to live the life that she was meant to live, not the life that she was supposed to live. The life she was supposed to live was the life she was living. And that was the one that her community and her family, the story, the script that they had written for her about, she was supposed to be a powerful executive, and she was supposed to be all of these things and have a husband and children, and she never wanted a husband, she never wanted children, and she was supposed to have this power, this job, right? But
sorry, you just gave me chills all
did
through,
I,
yeah.
right? Well, it sounds like your
you.
story.
Absolutely.
Right. Learning to live the life that you are here to live. That is so powerful. And the universe was banging you, it was banging you on the head. It was just saying that 2x4, bang, 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 right?
Oh, it had to get me where it hurt the most.
Right.
Where I couldn't physically move anymore.
Right. Wow. It just really knocked you down. Right. And so I know for me, my pain was debilitating. I mean, somebody killed me.
Right.
And so that is the thing that I think I needed. And because of that, I am grateful for that. Do you find that in your own self or in your work with your clients?
Oh, definitely. I think, I can't imagine it being any other way. It's so interesting. Even the moment, like, I started on this journey, which was 3 years ago.
Right.
It felt good. Even though I knew I was, it was going to take a while, because part of, we want change. But, and sometimes even with my clients, including myself, we decide, right, we want to create this different future, but we forget that, and we want to manifest like really fast.
Right, we want it now.
Yeah. Because
we hurt, we don't want to hurt, that's the end.
Right, and we're changing, so why don't we've changed, so why isn't it coming now?
Right.
But then we forget that there are things we have to work through, right, to get to the other side, that it doesn't.
And there's layers.
Correct, to unpeel.
Yes.
As you mentioned the onion earlier. And so, to get to that other side takes time. But the moment it happened, I knew it was the greatest gift. I knew it was this was my only way out. And because of that, I think I was able to make big decisions like quit a lucrative job, where I was doing really well, top 5% of the company performing year after year.
Wow.
So because of my discipline and my attitude, but I wasn't really enjoying it, but I was doing it because
You weren't happy.
no. And definitely I think taking all those steps was because of that, because I knew there was a gift in this and I didn't know what that was going to mean. And it's evolved into what it is, but it's been beautiful, but not to say it hasn't been challenging.
Sure. Well, it sounds like it was very challenging. I mean, just the fact that you couldn't get out of bed and you were in so much pain, that's, to keep living. I have, over the years, I've had clients that have been in that extreme amount of pain, 0 to 10, 0 being nothing, 10 being excruciating, and they're living their day in that 9, 10 range. That's, on one, it's exhausting, and two, it's draining. And spiritually, it feels, or it can feel like an abyss that you're just falling in, and there's nothing to stand on. There's nothing solid. So people will resort to all kinds of things. I have clients that have resorted to cutting themselves or suicidal thoughts or whatever it is, not because they are suicidal even, it's just because it gives them something to stand on. And for you to be in that amount of pain and to still be able to trust the universe, that's an amazing gift. That's an amazing gift. And I want to push you to come up with another answer besides I just did. I don't know what that is. I don't know if there is one. But, we're always about helping people understand something, helping people gain a solution for creating their own wellness. And I'm not that that's something that can be bottled, but I'm just wondering, I wonder what would bring about in someone that experience of trust. Like, how does that just happen? And I know your thing, a couple things that you mentioned that you really like people to do and practice that you've mentioned for yourself. And one of those is meditation. And there's something that happens in meditation that inspires trust, that inspires a connection, a voice with the universe. But that's my talking. Tell me, a little bit about why meditation is so important.
For me, and what I experience through meditation is that connection with yourself and that place that no matter what is happening, that you're okay and that everything's going to be okay.
Right.
And just also another thing for me is I was always playing roles, the good girl role or whatever role I needed to play, the good worker, the good daughter, the good friend. And for me, it was really, what it helped me with is stepping into a different side of me where I'm, coming from an authentic place. And that's okay. And that people, that's what it helped me with. And people might not be okay with me anymore because I'm, shifting. And, I get it. Once you shift, not everyone's going to like it.
Right.
But for me, it gave me that sense of like, even in chaos, I could come to 2 minutes to close my eyes and find that place of like, it's okay. You're going to be okay.
Right. Ram Dass, you said something that sparked a memory about Ram Dass. He talks about meditation a lot. He has his famous books on meditation. But he said that meditation taught him, and I'm paraphrasing, but said something like meditation taught him that he is not his pain. Right? It taught him to connect with it's such a higher self, a higher being, a higher sense, that crazy thoughts of pain, that physical sensation of pain wasn't him. And that could be a hard thing for a lot of people to grapple with. That could be a hard sort of concept. I am not my pain. And we could hear it in statements like, I am not the drug, I am not the alcohol, I am not, those types of things. But those things are obviously outside of us. But when it's a tumor, that's inside of us. That's part of your your body genetically or biologically at that moment. So there's a power in being able to have that concept of I am not my pain, even when you have all the evidence that says you are.
All of your pain.
Right. When you were in bed and you were just, grappling with pain, there's a moment where you had to say, I am not that. I am more than that. And I am healed, I am well. Whatever it is that you had to come up with, that you said.
Yeah.
What was that moment?
The moment, I think for me it was, so I actually named my, one of my cysts. I started off with 3 and then there was 1 left. Mm-hmm. So I named it, and I just I started it was part of me, but it's not me.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's, and she was just she came about. I named it a German name. I don't know why. Mm-hmm. But she came about because I wasn't really taking care of her. Mm. So I just really started taking care of her, right. Playing with her and being nice and
That's interesting. You were playing with her.
Yeah, a little child.
Right.
And then she had visitors sometimes too. And that was through my meditation, which is, different visitors would come and they would play and poke each other. And,
right.
And it's maybe that, for me, the 2 things that drive me, right, rejuvenate me are adventure and play and fun. Mm-hmm. And so I think I took a lot of that out of my life, and I was portraying a role of, success, elegance, she's got her shit together. Excuse my language.
It's great. You're on a podcast. You could say whatever you want.
Sometimes I throw that word out.
That's okay. But that was pretty tame. So.
But I always had that where people would look at me like, oh, wow. And, you're super fit. Great job, great education, blah,
right.
blah, blah. And that was not me. So I think I didn't play for a lot of the times in my 20s and my teens too. I was on the tennis court running around,
But you weren't playing, you were working.
I was working since the age of 8. So
right.
I think I needed to play, and it had to start with her.
Right. So. That's so powerful. In my book, one of the processes I talk about are to actually name your pain and to love it and to ask it what it needs to heal. So instead of us wagging our finger at it and telling it what it needs, it's about the tumor itself or whatever the pain is to say, hey, this is what I need. Yours needed to play. Yours needed to have fun. Yours needed to go on adventures, right? And as you provided that need, it let go. The tumor didn't need to be there. There's a client I had that lost 50 pounds in a month, which was unheard of, that much weight, not the most healthy way to lose weight. But he found himself standing in front of a refrigerator and hearing me, my voice in his head saying, who's hungry? Right? He had just eaten a huge meal and he was hurting. He had eaten so much food. And he was standing in front of the refrigerator wanting to eat. And he heard me say, who's hungry? And in that moment, he tells me that he had to recognize that it wasn't his stomach that was hungry anymore. Right? He was hurting. His body was physically in pain. He had shoved so much food into it. Wow. And so he kept asking the question, well, who's hungry? Who's hungry? And what do you need? Because what I think you need is the refrigerator and the stuff in the refrigerator, and that's not helping. So what do you need? And he literally lost all that weight. And at one point, and he was one of those, he was a pretty sort of macho kind of guy. He's probably in his late 50s, early 60s. And, that kind of guy, military and that type of stuff. And so he was really pissed at me. He was really pissed at me because how he had learned to be in his whole life was suddenly being challenged. Who's hungry? And he heard that his heart was hungry. Mm. And then he took a moment and said, well, what do you need? And it said play. And he literally went outside and started rolling in the grass. Now, this is a 6'4", really big ex-military kind of guy, right? Who's now rolling around in the grass. Now, he didn't give a crap about what other people were thinking because he's so secure in himself, right? But to see that, and to see someone in such a sort of masculine paradigm, not giving a crap what other people thought about him and playing like a kid, that's so powerful. And I imagine that for you. And that brought about his healing. Like I said, he lost 50 pounds in 1 month. That's ridiculous, right? Well, you're only 3 years out, right? Only 3 years ago, you were writhing in pain. And you're already at this point where you've gone beyond the pain. You healed the tumors. The 3 tumors went away, and you have a whole practice. That's a lot. That's a lot to do in 3 years. So congratulations on that. That's pretty amazing.
Thank you so much.
And on that note, we're going to be right back for the next third, right? The next third of the Convergence Healing Show. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. If you're interested, check out convergencehealingteas.com. You can try all of these yummy, delicious teas that are actually crafted in my home kitchen to help you feel better. We have a Sleep Well blend, a No More Anxiety blend, and all of those ingredients in there are designed to help you feel better through the traditional qualities that Mother Nature has to offer. Check it out. Hey everybody, thanks for staying tuned. We are back, and I have my beautiful guest here with me. You really are incredible. I love your story, not only because I resonate with it so much, but because it's got such a heartfelt truth under it when you share it. It's really powerful. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
You
And
know.
I love being here.
Thanks.
I'm all smiles from one end to the end, and I think it's the same. I resonate with yours as well, and what you do is incredible for the world. So
well,
thank
thank
you
you.
for this opportunity.
Awesome. Well, you're welcome to take my book if you like. I'm happy to share that with you too, especially if you think your clients will benefit from it.
I would love that.
So we're just wanted to say really quick to please stay tuned and to find us on, depending wherever you're watching us, whether it's SoundCloud or Stitcher or iTunes or the Reverie platform itself. I always say to you guys, I want to hear what you have to say, especially if you have any issues that you need some help working through. I will actually go and look for a practitioner that'll help you with some solutions. So if you're suffering something, let me know. We had somebody who was dealing with migraines and TMJ and all that sort of upper head type of pain, and I brought in a Nuka chiropractor so they could talk about those types of pain issues. And that was an episode we saw prior to this one. So if you have anything that you need support on, let me know. I want to hear from you, and I will do my best to find somebody to help you. So we're back, and I would love you to give some, I try to keep my show as solution-based as possible, to give people really opportunities to heal and to find people like you out there. So you had some tips for people. Tell us, what are your tips to help people feel better?
Well, I would start with the first and most important one is to decide that, you want something different, because
Right.
I think it always starts down with a decision and starts with a decision. And I get it. You're scared and you don't know what it's going to look like and who's going to be there for you. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about what it's going to look like, because the right people will show up, as they did for me. But because I was ready to show up. So really,
And you made that decision. That's a powerful message you are sending to the universe. So
I made that
Yes.
decision. Nobody, people could have maybe 6 months prior, year prior, might have told me, hey, you might want to look at what you're doing. You're all over the place,
Right,
but
right.
I wasn't ready. So to hear that, to making that decision, because it is your decision at the end of the day, and then committing to the whatever comes up for you, because sometimes it's going to be difficult. And sometimes I even had moments where I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, whoa. But those moments pass fairly fast, because sometimes you feel you go 4 steps forward, 3 back, right? Or 5 back or 10 back, but then you go 20 forward. So it always works out. And one of the most important things is to acknowledge what is happening. I think first and foremost, acknowledge what is, and I love how you said earlier, positive thoughts are positive thinking is one thing, and that's great and stuff, but that's only going to get you so far, right? Unless you start changing and shifting.
Right.
So
Yeah, because positive thinking is great, but I know so many people that put a little positive notes all over their house, but they feel terrible. And the feeling inside when they look at that positive note isn't in alignment with what that experience is. So you have to have the feeling in alignment with the positive thinking. I say, I have a little bit of a background in quantum theory and science. It's part of my master's degree, but I have this theory that reality is created when a thought and a feeling come together. So when those two things couple together, they create the physical world that we live in. Because we have random thoughts all the time, in one ear, out the other, right? We have random feelings all the time, in our body, out of our body. But when they come together, they create an actual physical thing. And most of us are very aware of that on the shadow side, on that, quote, negative side of things, right? We have that thought of I'm unworthy and that feeling of a pit in our stomach, and we create a life of unworthiness, sadness, and pain, right?
Absolutely.
If our thought is I'm amazing, and the feeling is I got butterflies in my heart, right? Those can couple together and create a different concept, a different world, literally, for that person. So that's just another one of my tips, just to allow people. But I think that's a big point that you're addressing, that it can't just be a positive thought, because that's nothing, right? And so this whole thing about positive thinking, yes, it's great. Yes, it's important, but it is only going to do anything if or create change if the feeling comes in with that thought. Right?
Absolutely.
Right.
I love that you brought that up earlier.
Nice.
So acknowledging and loving, loving what is happening. Mm-hmm. So loving what is means you may be, so understanding first and foremost, acknowledging where we are, understanding our past, our current situation is based on the past decisions we've made in our life. And our future is going to be based on the decision we make today. Right. So loving what it is means we are okay, and we acknowledge that we've done the best we can in our past, and now we know different. And because we know different, we're going to choose different. But there's a little bit of time that needs to happen between the now and the future. Right. And not forgetting that, because sometimes we get so frustrated. We're like, as I mentioned earlier, well, I'm changing now, so I want it now. I want it by tomorrow morning. But, we need to work through some things. And I'll mention a few tips we can work through. So loving what is, and accepting yourself for every decision you've made and every choice you've made and everything you've done, and being okay with it, because that's all you knew. There's so many things, when I look back, I was like, oh God, oh no. And then you realize okay, that's what I knew, and now I'm a different person. So that's okay. And then from there, self-love is a big one for me. So like you said, on a daily basis, I'm big on affirmation, but affirmation with the feeling, combined with the feeling, not just the thought. Right. Like, I've heard people say, well, they don't work for me, because you have to believe it. And
you have to feel it.
Feel it and believe it. Exactly. Excuse me. And looking at what I do is I look at myself in the mirror, and then I know if I believe it or not. And starting with something as simple as I'm learning to like you. And I think Louise Hay does a great job with affirmations. Yeah. And I've learned a lot from her, and she has a book on 21 days, how to love yourself. So with daily exercises. So doing stuff like that really helps, where you tell yourself positive things, or you're at work, you're in the bathroom, just say something nice to yourself. It's going to completely change your mood. If you're in a negative state, and if you're in a positive, it's just going to add more value. Yeah.
Well, the science behind that is ridiculous, that how you talk to your body will respond. So, and there's great studies about that. So,
absolutely,
very strong stuff.
Yeah, so it's self-love, and learning what you want, asking yourself what you want. That I think is really important. But another thing is around forgiveness. So forgiveness, I think forgiveness and letting go. So forgiveness is a big one, because I think that's what people with struggle the most and come to me the most for. I don't know if you see that.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, forgiving, more than anything, I see people needing to forgive themselves. That's the biggest one. Often people are focused on the outside, like forgiving other people, and they really struggle with, especially if something was done to them, they really struggled with that. I had to forgive the guy that killed me, and I had to actually even love him, because if I was going to be free and no longer his victim, then I really had to do that. So I did that for me, and a lot of people don't realize that that's what forgiveness is for. It's for you. The other person, sure, will get the benefit of the forgiveness, but it's really for you, like that old saying, you're not drinking the poison anymore. So that's awesome.
I love that. And that's where it starts, forgiveness with yourself. I always hear everyone out, and I'm like, okay, great. Now I have the whole story, but let's start with you.
Right.
And people are like, me? What do you mean me? Well, it starts with you, and it's like going.
You're the one carrying the pain.
Exactly.
They aren't. They're fine.
Exactly. And you've created, there's a lot that goes, there's some things, right? I mean, there's war. I come from a war-torn country. So some of that stuff I still don't have figured out. I'll be honest. Like, why does a 5-year-old get killed? Or,
Right.
some of that I know there are theories behind it, but I haven't really felt anything or believed anything deeply.
Right.
But when it comes to, a lot of the stuff we hold a lot of resentment towards, we were involved in it in one way or another. So looking at yourself, how you contributed to it, and then as well, if you were just kind of there, what is the gift? What can you learn from it?
Absolutely.
So I think forgiveness is definitely a big one. And one way is to write yourself. One tip I could give right now is how to write yourself a forgiveness letter. Put everything on there, and then get rid of it.
Burn it.
Burn it. Put it in the toilet. Sometimes I'm like, burn it. Don't burn your house down.
Yeah. And don't block up those pipes.
Yeah.
It'll just come back and get you.
Worse.
Yeah. Shred it.
Yeah, shred it.
Yeah.
I like that. But definitely something to do, because it's so freeing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show. I really appreciate having you here. I love what you do. I'm so impressed by how you healed yourself, and I think it's pretty amazing how you turned that pain. I call that the gold in the garbage. And the garbage is that pain of lying in bed, writhing in the pain. And the gold is that alchemical process of how you healed yourself, and you now share that healing. So it's a pretty cool thing that you're doing, and keep doing it. Thank you. Let people know how they can find you.
Perfect. Thank you. It's such a pleasure being on here, and I'm so humbled that I was invited. So thank you for sharing space today.
Awesome.
And you can find I wrote an ebook on 7 Secrets of Happiness with a bunch of exercises that you can use with steps you can implement. It's a free download, and it's on Dragana, Dragana live, live.com. And my Facebook is Dragana Live, and Instagram is Dragana Live. So find me there. I send get on my newsletter. I send a bunch of free tips, info out. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate having you. I appreciate all of your little tips that you gave for everybody. Those are awesome. And I expect all of you who are listening out there to actually implement them, to actually do all those things. So you have a chance to actually freely, right? There's no cost to these things. There's a chance to freely change your life. So thank you so much. Stay tuned. Again, let us know your thoughts. We love hearing from you, and make it a beautiful day. Ciao.